I'm sitting here in our dining room, which is set up for over 120 people coming tomorrow for our communal lunch, which is catered by our very own Jingarina. Now, here's an interesting thing about food. Do you know what genre of books sell the most copies? The answer is recipes. Do you know what genre of books sell the second most copies? The answer is diet. So there's something interesting about food. Why is that? Something fascinating. When we sit down to eat, sometimes we're looking forward to the meal. We might be very hungry. We might be looking forward because we went to a special restaurant, or our spouse made us our favorite food, or we, whatever circumstance, it was a good Yom Tov meal that we're really looking forward to. And very often, after the meal, we're disappointed. Not that we're disappointed with how good the food was. No, we're disappointed we ate too much. Oh, I really didn't need that. Did I really need the ice cream? Did I really need that second portion? Something strange where hope, and we have food awakens within us hope and aspirations and desire, but on the other hand, we lose self-control. What is something extremely fascinating about it? What is it? Let me also give you another piece of advice that parents can tell their children when they want them to finish their vegetables or finish eating. Parents would say, like the comedian says, my mother said to me, you better finish your food because children are starving in Africa. So I ate everything that was on my plate. They were still starving and I got fat. So what is it that parents could tell their children? Maybe that is more, that might work better or might make more sense than children starving in Africa. Now, this week in the Torah portion, we read about what's kosher food. The kosher animals, kosher fish, kosher birds. Last week we spoke about making blessings after we eat, and from there we have the idea of making blessings before we eat. Fascinating thing is that blessing before we eat, associated with food, is probably our connection to God, that it happens most often. Every time we take a drink of water, every time we take a fruit, or we take anything, a bite to eat, we always remember to make a blessing. Blessed be our God, King of the universe, who has given us the bread, the fruit, everything is made with His word. So our awareness of Hashem comes mostly through blessings that we make for food, which is fascinating. So what is it about the food? The Baal Shem Tov says, there's a verse in Tehillim where King David says, "Re'evim gam tzmeim nafshem be'tisatav." You think you're hungry and thirsty because your body wants to eat? No. You're hungry and thirsty because your soul wants the energy and the spark of divinity that's in the food. And the way he explains it is like this. When God created the world, He created it through speech. God spoke the world into existence. That speech, those words that God spoke, are in every item of creation. In the food that we eat, there is the words that God speaks into existence, and their permutations, and there's how they develop further. But at the end of the day, in the food we eat, there's a spark of holiness and godliness. As a matter of fact, Baal Shem Tov says a spark of Adam. In other words, there's a spark of our own souls, a spark that our soul needs, that's in the food. And when we partake of it in the proper way, we release it, we redeem it, and it becomes part of our essence, becomes part of our system. And it's awaiting for us to eat it for that purpose. And that's why we have this yearning for food. We think we're yearning because it tastes good, or it smells good, or we're hungry. But really our soul wants that divine spark that's in the item of food. Our soul yearns for it. There's a story of a chassid who came to the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, and he was there at a gathering at a Farbrengen. And the Rebbe told him, say l'chaim. So he takes a little cup of vodka and he drinks a few sips and puts it down. Says the Rebbe to him, let me tell you something. There was a barley, a stalk of barley that was blowing in the field, and it was hoping that it would be harvested. when all the rest of the barley was harvested, it was hoping that it would go along with it. And so it was. And then what else that was being prepared and made into vodka, it was hoping that it wouldn't be thrown into the bin, but actually become part of something useful. And then it was. He went to the shop and a Jew bought it and brought it to the table of the Rebbe. And now this spark, this little barley is hoping that it be drunk by a chassid with a holy, divine purpose. And you then made the blessing and then put it down. You didn't drink it, so it's still going to end up in the bin. Therefore, you have to be able to partake and to drink the food that you have, because maybe, who knows, there might be a spark of godliness that you need in the food. Maybe that's what our parents should have told us, or we could tell our children. There are sparks of godliness in the food that you're leaving on your plate that is hoping and waiting for you to eat it. But it has to be eaten for godly purpose. So this maybe is the explanation of the complicated relationship we have with food. At first, we have this yearning and desire for the food because we want the sparks of godliness in it. But when we don't eat it for a divine purpose, when we eat it only as a glutton, when we eat it only for self-gratification, it becomes a disappointing experience. That's why we're disappointed. It's disappointing because we didn't use it for the ultimate purpose of why we were meant to eat it. We ate it for a means rather than for an end. Yes, there is a means for our body to want the food, to like the taste, and to want to enjoy it. But it's a means so that the soul gets the spark of godliness. But the only way the soul can get the spark of godliness is if we eat it by first making a blessing on it, and by having intent that this act of eating is for a higher purpose. So when we do that, we elevate it, and our involvement with food is for a better purpose. I conclude with the amazing story I heard. There's a fellow in Jerusalem who survived the Holocaust, and he was asked how he did it. So he says when he was a kid, he was tested by Meir Shapiro of Lublin. He's the one who founded the Daf Yomi. And after the test, he would usually give out gifts to the kids. But this time he says, I don't have gifts. I'm going to give you advice for life. If you're going to make the after blessing, after eating, with proper concentration and intention, and read it from a siddur, then the great masters, the Chinuch and the Bar Hativ say that when you do so, you will never want for parnasa. You will always get what you need, and Hashem will always look after you. So I took that on, and I did that. And I started to always have the proper concentration when thanking Hashem for the food that we ate. When unfortunately the Holocaust happened, I was still young, still small, and I was afraid I would be pointed in the wrong direction. But I was thinking to myself, in the merit of the blessings I made and what Meir Shapiro told me, and indeed I was given life. But then I have to be in another line. Which work can you do? And someone came up to me and says, say you could good in the kitchen. So I said, I'll be good in the kitchen. I was placed in the kitchen, which was great. It was not this. The work wasn't as hard as elsewhere. Plus, I was able to have food. One day, a Nazi comes in and sees me in the kitchen and doesn't like the sight. Feels it's too easy for me. So he gives me a little hammer and says, I want you to go outside and dig me a big pit with this hammer. This, and tells me the size it has to be, and in 3 hours it has to be ready. I go outside, there's no way. It'll take me 3 weeks, not 3 hours. But all of a sudden, a group of Russian POWs pass by, and they're begging me for food. They know the kitchen is there. I say, you know what? You dig me the pit, I'll get you the food. And they did. And that's how I survived the war. So this is our relationship with food. Think about it and eat mindfully. Make a blessing. Connect to God. And realize that this is an event and an experience of connection to Hashem. Good Shabbos.